My best friend tried to steal my girl behind my back, but I got the perfect revenge and ended up with someone even better. I walked into my favorite country bar and grill, feeling ready to unwind after a long week. It was the kind of place where the wooden floors creaked under your boots and the smell of burgers and beer filled the air, a comfort zone for someone like me. I found a small table tucked away in the back, ordered a hearty plate of a sandwich and fries with a cold beer to wash it all down, and settled in. The TV mounted above the bar was tuned to a PBS special about country music, and my attention naturally drifted toward it. They were diving into the lives of legendary stars, the kind whose voices shaped entire generations. As I watched, I was struck by the melancholic tone of the program. It wasn't just about their music, but the hard lives so many of them had lived before making it big. Poverty, heartbreak, and struggle were common threads running through their stories. While I wasn't entirely surprised by their humble beginnings, it still hit home just how much grit it took for them to reach the heights they did. As the program played on, I worked my way through my meal, enjoying the warm comfort of the food and the familiar ambience of the bar. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something that made me stop mid-bite. Bob, my closest friend, walked in. But it wasn't just Bob. He was with Olivia. That sight hit me like a punch to the gut. Olivia wasn't just a random woman. She was supposed to be my girlfriend. I had invited her out to join me that night, but she told me she already had plans with friends. She'd even suggested we reschedule for tomorrow. Yet here she was, arm in arm with Bob, her laughter carrying through the room like nothing was out of the ordinary. For 6 months, I had believed Olivia and I were building something solid. We spent most weekends together, and our relationship had grown to a point where I could see a future with her. We'd even talked about the idea of getting engaged someday, not in a rushed or impulsive way, but as something to consider down the road. I'd let myself fall hard for her, believing she felt the same way. But seeing her with Bob threw all of that into question. As I sat there trying to process what I was seeing, Patsy Cline's Crazy began playing on the jukebox. The mournful lyrics, dripping with heartbreak and betrayal, seemed almost too on the nose for the situation. I knew you'd love me as long as you wanted, and then someday you'd leave me for somebody new. Those words reverberated in my head, making me wonder if Bob was that somebody new. What made it worse was the fact that Bob wasn't just a casual acquaintance. He was my best friend, someone I trusted implicitly. We had an unspoken code, the kind of loyalty you expect from a friendship forged over years. Bob knew exactly how I felt about Olivia. There was no way he didn't. And yet here he was, crossing a line I never thought he'd dare approach. Our friendship had started years ago, back when I moved to Ohio on a football scholarship. I'd grown up in Kentucky, the eldest of 9 kids in a tight-knit, hard-working family. Money was always tight, and my scholarship was the only way I could afford college. My plan was to study mechanical engineering, a natural choice given my love for working with my hands. I wasn't the most outgoing guy back then, but I knew how to treat people right, especially women, thanks to the lessons my mom drilled into me about respecting others. Bob and I met during my freshman year. He was studying business management and had a natural charisma that drew people to him. While I was the quiet, reserved type, Bob was the life of the party, the guy who always had a joke ready and could talk his way into, or out of, any situation. Despite our differences, we clicked. He helped me come out of my shell, and I, in turn, became the steady presence he could rely on when things got chaotic. After college, we both ended up staying in Ohio. I landed a job as a mechanical engineer at Ford, while Bob worked his way up in a warehouse that supplied parts to my plant. Our friendship continued to thrive. Weekends were often spent hanging out, and it was through Bob that I met Alice. She was his girlfriend, and she worked as an inventory manager at his warehouse. Alice was warm, kind, and effortlessly beautiful, the kind of person who lit up a room without even trying. I'll admit, I was smitten the first time I met her. But out of respect for Bob and our friendship, I kept those feelings buried. It was at a Christmas party hosted by Bob's workplace that I met Olivia. She was a stark contrast to Alice, flashy, flirtatious, and unapologetically bold. Olivia worked as a secretary for one of Bob's higher-ups, and from the moment we started talking, there was an undeniable chemistry. She seemed fascinated by my job at Ford and the fact that I sent money home every month to help my family. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans to see each other again. Our relationship moved quickly. Olivia and I began spending almost every weekend together, and for a while, it felt like things were falling into place. She had a magnetic personality and a way of making me feel like the center of her world, at least when it suited her. But there were small cracks in the facade that I couldn't ignore. Her flirtatious nature sometimes made me uneasy, and her fascination with material things didn't quite align with my own values. I chalked it up to differences in upbringing and tried to reassure her that we could build a good life together. Looking back, there had always been an undercurrent of tension during our double dates with Bob and Alice. Olivia seemed to go out of her way to draw Bob's attention, and while I tried to brush it off as harmless banter, it gnawed at me. That night at the bar, seeing them together confirmed what I hadn't wanted to admit. Bob hadn't just crossed a line, he'd obliterated it. As Patsy Cline's voice crooned through the room, I realized everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Olivia and my friendship with Bob was a lie. That night marked the end of one chapter of my life, but it was only the beginning of a story that would take me through betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately, redemption. After Olivia slipped on the friendship ring I'd given her, her grin had been radiant, and in that moment, I thought things between us were solid. Around that time, I had also been hitting the gym regularly after work, cutting down my weight to a leaner 230 pounds. I felt pretty good about how I looked and was hopeful about our future. But everything changed when I saw Olivia and Bob together at the country bar. That single moment was like a hammer to the chest. Seeing them together, and worse, catching them in an intimate moment, broke something inside me. Following that night, I severed all ties with both of them. The betrayal stung deeply, not just because of Olivia, but because Bob had been my closest friend. Despite my anger, I couldn't help but feel sympathy for Alice. She had been left blindsided too, caught in the crossfire of their selfish choices. Weeks passed, and I did my best to move forward, throwing myself into work and gym sessions to channel my frustration. 2 weeks later, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was Alice. Her voice carried both sadness and concern as she apologized for what had happened between me and Olivia. She admitted she had suspected Olivia might have been unfaithful, but never imagined it would involve Bob. When I asked if she thought there were others, Alice hesitated before revealing that she had once seen Olivia having lunch with her boss, Brad. It had seemed innocent at the time, but in hindsight, she couldn't be sure. Alice's call brought a mix of emotions. On the one hand, it felt good to hear from someone who understood what I was going through. On the other, it reopened wounds that hadn't yet fully healed. Alice suggested we catch up sometime, and I agreed. Our brief conversation left me with a strange blend of relief and lingering unease, but I appreciated her reaching out. A couple of weeks later, fate intervened. While I was at the supermarket one evening, I bumped into Alice. She greeted me warmly, her smile genuine, and we started chatting. She looked radiant, even in her casual outfit, and there was something about her presence that felt comforting. When I asked how she'd been, she surprised me by admitting she had turned down several date offers because she was waiting for someone special, someone she hoped would call. I felt my heart skip a beat as it dawned on me that she might be talking about me. Summoning my courage, I asked if she'd like to go out with me. Her response was immediate and enthusiastic. She'd been hoping I'd ask. We agreed to meet on Saturday for dinner at my favorite country bar and grill. That week flew by, and when Saturday arrived, I picked her up at 6 o'clock. Alice looked stunning in a Western-inspired outfit. Jeans, a vest, cowgirl boots, and a hat that framed her face perfectly. I couldn't help but smile as she climbed into my truck, and she laughed, her excitement contagious. The bar was lively as usual, with a country western band scheduled to play later in the evening. We found a booth, ordered a couple of beers, and spent the next hour talking. I learned things about Alice I hadn't known before, like how she'd grown up in Kentucky, just a county over from where I was raised. She shared how her journey from college to her current job had brought her to Ohio. There was an ease to our conversation, as if we'd known each other forever. When the band started playing, we made our way to the dance floor. The first two songs were slow, perfect for couples, and I held her close as we swayed to the music. The band played a mix of classics, including some Roy Orbison hits that we both loved. When the tempo picked up, we stepped off the floor and watched the crowd. Alice teased me about joining the line dancing, but I admitted it wasn't my thing. She smiled mischievously and joined in anyway, her playful energy lighting up the room. At one point, she caught my eye and gave her hips a cheeky shake, making me laugh and clap for her. After the band played its final song, I walked Alice to her door and asked if she'd like to go out again the following Saturday. I suggested we visit Cedar Point, an amusement park I thought she might enjoy. She eagerly agreed, and after a sweet goodnight kiss, I left feeling lighter than I had in months. The following Saturday, I picked Alice up early for our trip to Cedar Point. The drive was filled with easy conversation and laughter. She mentioned she hadn't told Bob or Olivia about us, and I assured her I was fine with keeping things private for now. The day was perfect. We rode roller coasters, caught a few live shows, and indulged in all the classic amusement park snacks. By the time we left, we were both exhausted but happy. We stopped for dinner at a Texas Roadhouse on the way back, where we shared more stories and laughed until our sides hurt. When we reached her place, Alice introduced me to her roommate, Joan, a kind woman in her 50s who worked in retail. It was clear they had a close, almost familial bond. As I said goodnight, Alice confessed she had always liked me and was glad we'd finally reconnected. Her honesty and warmth struck a chord, and I told her I felt the same way. The following week, I invited Alice to a formal dinner event hosted by my boss in celebration of his anniversary. I explained that the party would be held at a Hilton hotel and that I'd booked a room for the night, since there would likely be drinking. Alice didn't hesitate to accept, even joking that we wouldn't need separate beds. Her openness about her feelings was refreshing, and I promised her I'd never lead her on or cause her harm. The night of the event, Alice looked stunning in an elegant dress, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride having her by my side. On the way to the hotel, she confided that she was considering looking for a new job. Seeing Bob and Olivia every day at work had become unbearable, and she even mentioned hearing rumors that Olivia might be pregnant. The revelation didn't surprise me, but it solidified my belief that Alice deserved far better than the toxic environment she was stuck in. The evening of the party, I was putting the final touches on my tuxedo in the hotel bathroom. Stepping out into the room, I was struck speechless. Alice stood before me, radiant in a form-fitting blue dress that highlighted her curves while maintaining an elegant sophistication. Her hair cascaded over her shoulders, soft and flawless. She had an effortless beauty, the kind that turned heads without trying. She exuded a mix of class and allure that made it nearly impossible to look away. For a moment, I forgot all about the party. My eyes were fixed on her, and the thought crossed my mind that I'd be perfectly content skipping the whole event just to stay in this room with her. However, Alice was quick to keep us on track, her playful tones snapping me out of my trance as we headed downstairs to the venue. The ballroom was beautifully decorated, with soft lighting and elegant floral arrangements adorning the tables. As we entered, my boss and his wife greeted us warmly, their smiles genuine. My boss introduced his wife to Alice, who immediately extended her charm, making an impression. As the couple mingled elsewhere, I couldn't help but notice my boss glancing back at Alice more than once, clearly impressed. I took Alice around the room, introducing her to colleagues and their spouses. Compliments flowed freely. Her beauty and grace seemed to captivate everyone she met. We settled at a table after grabbing drinks, the air filled with the low hum of conversations and the occasional burst of laughter. The event featured an assortment of appetizers, and dinner was planned to follow. Alice spotted a few familiar faces, women she had interacted with professionally through her inventory control role, and she exchanged a friendly wave. I took the opportunity to approach Mary, the head of human resources, and initiated a casual conversation. I mentioned Alice's interest in finding a new job and inquired about any upcoming openings in the supply chain department. Mary, ever the professional, informed me that there was indeed an opening due to an upcoming retirement. She expressed her willingness to schedule an interview for Alice, adding a compliment about her striking presence. I thanked Mary sincerely, feeling hopeful about this opportunity for Alice. The party turned out to be a wonderful experience. Alice and I spent much of the evening dancing. I also had a few dances with the wives of my colleagues, while Alice charmed the husbands. The dinner was exceptional. Plates of perfectly cooked roast beef, chicken, and shrimp paired with an array of sides. After a few more drinks and a few more laughs, we decided to call it a night and headed back upstairs to our room. As the door closed behind us, I hesitated, wanting to be sure Alice was comfortable with how the evening might end. Her response was straightforward and confident. With her help, we carefully hung her stunning dress and my tuxedo, pulling down the covers on the bed. What followed was a tender, intimate moment that solidified the growing bond between us. As we drifted off to sleep, Alice whispered 3 words that stayed with me. I love you. The next morning, I woke to the enticing aroma of fresh coffee. Alice had already showered and dressed, bringing me a cup of coffee as I stirred awake. Her warm smile and cheerful greeting made the morning feel brighter. After a quick shower and a shared cup of coffee, we went downstairs for breakfast. The dining room was lively, with familiar faces from the night before exchanging pleasantries. As we ate, Mary stopped by our table to remind Alice of her interview on Monday. Alice's eyes filled with gratitude and emotion as I revealed that I had arranged it for her, knowing how much she had wanted a fresh start. She whispered her thanks, her voice trembling slightly as she admitted it felt too good to be true. On our way home, I brought up an idea I'd been considering. In 2 weeks, I planned to visit my parents in Kentucky and wanted Alice to come along. I also offered to make a stop to visit her family if she wished. Alice agreed enthusiastically, but warned me that her parents were traditional and would likely insist we sleep separately. I assured her that everything would work out. 2 weeks later, we set off for Kentucky. During the drive, Alice mentioned a rumor she'd heard. Bob and Olivia were planning to marry, likely because Olivia was visibly pregnant. She speculated that Olivia saw the marriage as a ticket to wealth, but I pointed out that Bob's lifestyle was built on debt and his parents' money. Olivia was in for a rude awakening if she thought Bob could provide the lavish life she seemed to want. When we arrived at my parents' home, the warm welcome was everything I'd hoped for. My family's sprawling farmhouse, with its numerous bedrooms and bathrooms, felt alive with the energy of my siblings. They greeted Alice with open arms, showering her with hugs and making her feel instantly at home. My mom and dad were equally warm, and I could tell they were as charmed by Alice as I was. Alice spent time exploring the house, pausing to admire the old photos on the walls. One particular picture of me in my football uniform caught her attention, and I noticed her eyes glistening with emotion. When I asked if something was wrong, she shared a story that stunned me. During one of my high school football games, she had been the girl I'd saved in the tunnel. 2 guys had been harassing her, and I had intervened, warning them to leave her alone. She had never seen my face, but remembered my jersey number. Hearing her recount the event was surreal, and it felt like fate had brought us together. That night, my mom prepared a separate room for Alice, while I was given a bed in the basement. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Alice quietly joined me, and though we shared a tender moment, she returned to her room an hour later, respecting my family's wishes. The next day, we visited Alice's family. Their home was beautiful, and I quickly realized they were well off. Alice introduced me as her boyfriend, and her family welcomed me warmly. Her father, Hank, took a particular interest in my background and career, his protectiveness over his little girl evident. It was during this visit that I made a decision. I asked Mr. Carter for his blessing to marry Alice, knowing in my heart that she was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. Alice was caught off guard but visibly moved, her eyes filling with tears as she realized how deeply I felt for her. When I approached Alice's father to ask for his blessing, I could tell he appreciated the gesture. He listened thoughtfully as I explained my intentions and my love for his daughter. His response was heartfelt. He made it clear that he trusted Alice to follow her heart and asked her directly if she truly loved me. Without hesitation, Alice responded that she did, with all her heart. With that, he gave us his blessing, adding only one condition, that the wedding take place in Kentucky so he and Alice's mother could host a proper celebration. They even offered to cover all the expenses. The moment felt perfect, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I surprised everyone by pulling an engagement ring from my pocket, dropping to one knee, and officially proposing to Alice right there in her parents' living room. Her joy was immediate and overwhelming. She said yes, throwing her arms around me before rushing to kiss her father and embrace her mother, who was already wiping away tears of happiness. The entire family joined us for a celebratory chicken dinner, laughter and smiles filling the air as we discussed our future plans. Later that evening, we returned to my parents' farmhouse and shared the news with my family. My mom and dad were thrilled, and word quickly spread to my extended family, many of whom still lived nearby. Plans for a barbecue celebration were set in motion almost instantly. My dad declared himself the grill master for the occasion, while my mom prepared an array of meats and side dishes. Alice eagerly volunteered to help in the kitchen, impressing my mom with her cooking skills and warm personality. The barbecue turned into a lively gathering, with relatives coming by to congratulate us and get to know Alice. It was the first time I had ever brought someone home to meet the family, and they all adored her. Many of my aunts and uncles pulled me aside to tell me I was lucky to have found someone so special, encouraging me to cherish her. As the day wound down, Alice whispered to me about an amusing encounter with my mom, who had warned her to watch out for an obstacle on the stairs after accidentally kicking a pair of shoes down them herself. My mom had laughed it off, attributing her occasional clumsiness to the lively spirit that had led her to raise so many children. Later that night, Alice and I managed to steal a quiet moment together, despite the farmhouse being packed with family. We kept things hushed, savoring the intimacy of the moment. She didn't return to her room upstairs until nearly 5 in the morning, leaving us both exhausted but blissfully happy. The next morning, over a hearty country breakfast, my family continued to shower Alice with warmth and affection. We said our goodbyes with hugs and promises to keep everyone updated on the wedding plans. On the drive back home, Alice expressed how much she loved being part of my family and how excited she was about her future. On Monday, Alice attended her scheduled interview with Mary in HR at Ford. By Tuesday, she received the call offering her the position. Overjoyed, she called to share the news with me, though I was already in the loop thanks to Mary. We celebrated that evening with a dinner date at my favorite country bar. Alice mentioned how peaceful the past 2 weeks had been at work, with Bob and Olivia away on vacation. She also let slip that their vacation was doubling as a trip to Las Vegas to get married, likely prompted by Olivia's pregnancy. Alice couldn't help but chuckle at the irony, calling it the best 2 weeks she'd ever had at her old job. As Alice settled into her new role at Ford, she kept our engagement under wraps at first. However, when coworkers began to notice her engagement ring, she proudly declared her commitment to me, leaving no room for any advances or misunderstandings. She confided that before leaving her old job, she'd left an anonymous note on Bob's desk advising him to consider a DNA test once the baby was born, given Olivia's close relationship with her boss. Alice had no regrets about the note, finding it a fitting farewell. Wedding planning was in full swing, and Alice's roommate, Joan, proved to be an invaluable ally. Joan had connections at a local retail store and introduced Alice to a talented dressmaker who began working on her wedding gown. Joan, along with her daughter, promised to attend the wedding, offering their full support. Meanwhile, my mom eagerly took on the task of managing the guest list for my side of the family, even purchasing invitations to ensure everything was handled seamlessly. Alice's parents, true to their word, were deeply involved in the planning. Her mom secured a caterer and began coordinating with my mom to finalize the menu. Her dad used his business connections to book a spacious church and a high-end venue for the reception. They also arranged for a talented band to provide live music. Despite the whirlwind of preparations, everything seemed to fall into place with remarkable ease. One evening, I asked Alice if she thought we were going overboard with the scale of the wedding. She laughed and explained that her parents had always dreamed of hosting grand weddings for their daughters and assured me it was their vision, not hers. She admitted that she had kept her family's wealth hidden because she wanted me to love her for who she was, not for her background. I reassured her that my feelings had nothing to do with money and everything to do with her heart and character. Alice finalized her wedding party lineup, selecting her father to walk her down the aisle. Her older sister would be her maid of honor, and her younger sister, along with my two married sisters, would serve as bridesmaids. My brothers-in-law would join my younger brother as groomsmen, with my youngest brother stepping up as my best man. My niece and nephew were thrilled to be chosen as the flower girl and ring bearer. The wedding was shaping up to be a true family affair, filled with love and excitement. As the big day approached, a logistical issue arose. Since Alice had only been at her new job for 4 months, she hadn't accrued any vacation time. We brainstormed solutions and ultimately decided on a whirlwind weekend trip. Leave Friday evening, get married on Saturday, and return Sunday night. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option under the circumstances. Just 2 weeks before the wedding, my plant manager called me into his office. We had a good rapport, and I wasn't surprised when he brought up the wedding. He mentioned hearing about our tight schedule and smiled, suggesting he might have a way to help ease the pressure. Alice didn't have any vacation days left, and I was prepared to stick with our whirlwind weekend wedding plan. However, my plant manager, Mark, called me into his office with an unexpected announcement. He informed me that Alice would be granted personal time off starting Thursday through the entire following week. It was a generous gesture that eliminated all the stress of rushing to and from the wedding. Then, to top it off, he handed me 2 tickets for a 4-day cruise as a honeymoon gift. I couldn't thank him enough and knew Alice would be over the moon. Excited, I called Alice and suggested we go out for lunch, as I had something important to share. At the restaurant, she was curious about my excitement. When I told her about the extra time off and showed her the cruise tickets, her eyes immediately welled up with tears. She couldn't believe how everything was falling into place. With the extended time off, we planned to leave for Kentucky on Thursday, making room for the rehearsal and dinner on Friday without feeling rushed. On Friday, the rehearsal went smoothly, and the dinner that followed was filled with warmth and laughter. I had a moment with my dad, asking if he needed help with any expenses. He revealed that he had set aside all the money I had sent him since the announcement of the wedding. I couldn't have been prouder of him. His humility and thoughtfulness were unmatched. After the dinner, I kissed Alice goodnight, promising to see her the next day. Alice had informed her mom about the number of guests attending, but she didn't share the total with me, joking that she didn't want to add to my nerves. However, I knew the turnout would be massive. My family alone, siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins, was enough to fill a small venue, and with Alice's connections, the motels in both counties had been fully booked for months. Saturday morning, I woke up to the smell of breakfast, and my mom insisted I eat something to settle my nerves. Over a hearty meal, she shared how much she and my dad admired the Carters, who had spoken highly of me. Afterward, I took a long shower, shaved, and dressed in my white tuxedo, chosen to match Alice's gown. My brothers, also part of the wedding party, were dressed sharply in black tuxedos. The church was a short drive away, located in the neighboring county. It was large enough to hold over 600 people, and as guests began to arrive, my brothers and I helped direct them to their seats. Though they insisted I didn't have to, I wanted to keep myself occupied and greet as many familiar faces as possible. Some relatives I hadn't seen in years showed up, and I was thrilled to spot several of my coworkers, including Mark and his wife, who had flown in for the occasion. When Alice's limousine pulled up, I was ushered to the front of the church, as it was tradition not to see the bride before the ceremony. The organist began playing, signaling everyone to take their seats. One by one, the wedding party made their way down the aisle. Alice's sisters paired with my brothers, followed by my married siblings and their spouses. My nephew carried the rings, though I kept the actual wedding band in my pocket for safekeeping. My niece, the flower girl, scattered rose petals along a white cloth rolled out by 2 attendants. Then the music shifted to the wedding march, and everyone rose to their feet. Alice appeared, escorted by her father, and the sight of her took my breath away. She looked like an angel, her radiant beauty magnified by the love and pride on her face. Tears streamed down my face as I watched her approach. When the minister asked who gave her away, her father responded proudly, "Her mother and I." We exchanged vows, each word carrying the weight of our commitment to one another. I slid the ring onto her finger, and when the minister gave the go-ahead, I kissed her with all the love I felt. As we turned to face the crowd, the minister announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Charles Jones." The church erupted in cheers, and the energy was electric. After greeting guests at the church door, we headed to the reception hall, where drinks and appetizers awaited. The crowd stood and cheered as we entered, making us feel like royalty. Mr. Carter gave a heartfelt toast before announcing dinner. The buffet was well organized, allowing everyone to eat quickly, though Alice and I took our time, pausing frequently to kiss whenever glasses were clinked. The band played as tables were moved back to expand the dance floor. Alice and I shared our first dance, followed by the wedding party, and then the rest of the guests joined in. The reception carried on for hours, with music, dancing, and even a second round of food for the guests who stayed late. It was a perfect night, filled with laughter, love, and memories we would cherish forever. For our honeymoon, the cruise was an unforgettable experience. We left for the wedding in my truck, which turned out to be a wise choice. I rented a small U-Haul to bring back the mountain of gifts we had received. Once we returned, Alice and I decided to find a new home. We eventually purchased a 3-bedroom house with a hot tub, which felt like a perfect upgrade from my small apartment. In the meantime, we left most of our gifts at Joan's house, where Alice had lived before the wedding. Joan assured us she was financially secure and would miss having Alice around but was happy for her new chapter. Our evenings were spent writing thank you cards, a task we tackled together with joy. At work, we often met for lunch, enjoying the comfort of each other's company even during busy days. Life felt balanced and full of promise. 3 months passed, and while we faced no major conflicts, we actively worked to maintain strong communication, a key piece of advice we had both taken to heart. One day, Alice received a call from an old friend, sharing gossip about Bob and Olivia. It turned out Bob's financial troubles had worsened, and rumors suggested someone had anonymously advised him to get a DNA test for the baby. The results confirmed what many suspected: Bob wasn't the father. The news didn't surprise us, but it did affirm that we had moved on to something far healthier and more meaningful. Looking back, everything, both the heartbreaks and the triumphs, led us to this point. We had built a life together founded on love, trust, and mutual respect, and it was a life I wouldn't trade for anything. Thank you for reading my story. The part about country music? That's true. I really did see it on PBS.
The end.